Okay, what's up? So, 100 D&B Bangers from Scratch, episode 4. For this one, I told you guys I'd be doing the breakdown to Nuclear, which is one of the hardest tunes that I've made in a while. And I know quite a lot of you are very excited for it, especially for that main bass, which we'll get to towards the end. So we're going to do it the same way as usual, play the track through, and then we'll break down the main stuff. Let's go.
This is not a test. NORAD has detected the launch of 6 nuclear missiles. It is anticipated that these missiles will be armed with nuclear warheads. Since the targets are unknown at this time, all civilians in the United States are highly encouraged to remain calm and seek underground refuge. Radiation levels will be lethal.
Wait. So, if we want to start breaking this one down, what we have is, and the second half of the track is pretty much just the same as the first, so I won't go and play that out for you guys. So at the beginning, we start out with the most notable thing, which is actually an Indiana Jones sample. So I took this from the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's from the Nuketown scene. So yeah, we pretty much just got like some atmospheric stuff there, just creating an atmosphere. We've got some tension shackles. And we got a wind tunnel here. I did used to have some heartbeats. But I actually took those out because I found that they were a little bit hard to mix in and they were creating a bit too much clashing with the other elements. We've got an atmosphere here. And then as we come in, we have this sort of fill area. So this is some Morse code. Which I just wash out with my cube rack, just with some reverb, and I bring the auto pan in, so that starts fluttering towards the end. You see the amount of the fluttering sort of volumes up there. I've also got just a riser from the effin' pack there that sort of builds it up. And then I've also got an impact. And then a suck back. So this little part almost creates that effect where we're just going like, we're sucking you out and we're bringing you back in, which is something I really like doing in a lot of my music because it sort of just takes you away for a second. It's sort of what you want to do in a turnaround or a fill. You take them away from the main thing for a second, then you bring them back. At the start, standard, I've got an impact. But what I've actually done is I've dropped the lows on this impact and I put a sub drop here. So this is a sub drop plus an impact that I made. And then I have on top of that a high passed filter or filtered up impact here. And then the other things, just a drone here. So if you think about, like, we've got a lot of different atmospheric effects. We've got something that sort of sets the scene in an environment. We've got a bit of ambience. We've got some wind for a bit of a scary effect. And then we just have like a low and a high sustained drone. And then while this is going on, I've got a nuclear broadcast sort of siren or you know, the radio sound, whatever you want to call that is. That I've just done some EQing and soothing on and put a bit of reverb on it. And while this is all going up, we have this long tension riser. And then of course we have the hat that's going along. And that's just so that, because there's really nothing else there to hold on to, it's really important that you chuck in hats like that at the beginning so that people have something that they can mix to and beat match to. I think that's pretty much it for that part. So as we come up to the top, of course, cut it, put in the heavyweight, my producer tag, and then we get into our breakdown section. So our breakdown section, I actually wanted to emulate one of the Skrillex songs. I think it's Right Now by Skrillex. It's in his original album, Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites. I might be saying that wrong, but it has this sort of effect here. So to begin with, what I have done, oh yeah, Right In by Skrillex. I literally got it here as a reference. So what I've done is I've basically done a bunch of stacks here where they all are under the same sort of volume automation. And pretty much on the group, the way I've done that is just using a utility that drops the volume down. We've got a little bit of a fade, so it's not a full dip there. But so what's happening here? So I've got a vocal chop. Oops, sorry, not that one. This one down here. Now without the processing. Oh. So you can see I've just applied a bunch of distortion. So some saturation, that just topped off the highs. I've added a little alto boy. So that just basically adds in a chain where it's form and shifted 12 semitones up. So without it, with it, it sort of adds this extra higher layer on there, and it gives a bit more of the high presence without taking too much from the lows, because it's been done in parallel. We still have the other chain going through here. I've got a thermal, which is just chucking on a bit of grit. Another thermal, chucking on more grit. This one's actually pushing it quite a lot. That's making a big difference there. Then I've got a Gullfoss. Just doing some dynamic EQ there. I'm dropping the drive on the saturator back and the output here and putting a soft clip on. So I'm basically just doing some gain control here. Bit of EQing to cut the lows. And then a pitch shifter. Which again, I've got this pitched up by 12, but the mix is only on 28%. So it's adding a little bit of high presence without taking the lows away. What that does is it just makes it a lot easier to have some presence without making it too loud. Because you'll find stuff that's lower on the spectrum, sometimes if you have other things going on, it can be difficult to make the sound present without boosting the actual volume of it too much, which takes up a lot of space in the mix and can muddy up your mix. So then we have that stacked. This is just like a reverb hit that's in the same key. And then I've got a bass hit, but you can see I'm cutting all the sub and I'm really reducing everything above 1K. So it's just the mid region here that I'm letting in. And originally I had this sound, but I found that that was causing a bit too much interference. And then I've also stacked this with the sub that I've made. So you can see I've done mid-side EQing here, boosted the mids, I've cut the sides above or below 150 there. And you can see I've really carved out the mid section here for this Moonboy one, which is already sitting there. And then I've let some of the highs through because obviously there's not too much you can see. But basically this patch, it's just a basic MG wave. I'm FMing from a saw wave, which is 2 octaves above. I have a sub, so we're just getting more boost on the sub there by turning that on. And then I'm running A through the filter, and I have the cutoff and a bit of resonance here, so that we're really accentuating this this region. That then boosts through a tube distortion, which is maxed out at 100%, bit of multiband compression, phaser, reverb, and then a filter. So when you stack these all together, so we have our sub, our mid bass, our tonal layer, which is in the background, and then we have our main focus, which is this vocal chop. And then on top of that, what I've done is I've grouped these all together, put them on a saturator. I did have some OTT and Gullfoss, but I decided to turn those off. I was finding it was a bit too compressed and I wanted a bit more dynamic range in it. So I've just chucked a saturator on here, which is putting the soft clip on, so it's peaking it at 0 and not letting it go on the red. And then what I've done is I've added in this atmosphere, a crowd roar, and then another riser. But what I've done with these is everything now is grouped underneath that volume automation. So what it does is it makes it all cohesive in terms of the shape of the sound going through time. And then, so if I turn on everything now, I've also done a parallel reverb chain, which has this at 100%, 1 second decay. It's just focusing on the mids here, but it's pretty high in the mix. I haven't turned that down here, so... So what happens is we have this really defined shape with the volume automation, but it can make it sound a bit too digital. So then I add the reverb on to give it a bit more decay and space. And then the last thing I do, well, I also have a downer coming here. That's just a riser that I reversed. But what I do is I've added a kick. So that hits at the start of every beat. And then I also have a snare, which is going up. So that's sort of in the background. It's sort of like a build snare. But then I also, instead of having a kick on the 5th one here, I have a snare. Now this snare is just layered up, so... And then it has some reverb there. Just some layered snares with a bit of reverb. And then all together...
This is not a test, nor it has detected the...
Sorry, and I forgot I also have this sort of siren-y one doing the same thing. So basically, like when you're stacking all these things up, you want them to complement each other in the mix. You want the keys and the tones to complement each other. And then you want to process them all in a similar way where you're putting the same shape over them so it sounds cohesive as like it's one hit. It's not, 5 or 7 different elements on top of each other. And then we come into the build breakdown area.
Nor it has detected the...
So, for this, I got a guitar sample from a Moonboy pack. And then I've made a sub bass to follow that because I've cut the lows here because it was a bit muddy. There's that patch if you want to do it. And then I also have a crowd clap. So then we also have standard, just your risers and stuff. So I did have a nuclear wind pad, but I found that was a bit, it was a bit muddy in the mix. So that riser that I reversed, I've got it the right way here now. I've also got another alarm, which is basically like a
armed with nuclear warheads. Since the targets are unknown at this time, all civilians in the United States are highly encouraged to remain calm and seek underground refuge. Radiation levels will be lethal.
So, what have I done here? So this I actually synthesized the sound of like a nuke falling. So let's have a look at what I did here. So what this sound is it is a sine wave, which has two voices. And what I've done is I've chucked an air cannon on here on the noise. So it's a sine wave with some noise. And we'll look at your span. So what I've done is I've chucked a low pass filter and put the resonance really to a point where it accentuates this one here. And then I've put a diode distortion on it. Some compression. And a high pass filter to cut the lows off. So that's a pretty annoying high-end sound, but then what happens is I put a kilohertz reverb on it. And then I put a kilohertz pitcher on it where I'm pitching it down. So it starts 12 semitones up, so an octave up, and then starts pitching down. And then while this is going on, I've got a cube rack on here, so I'm basically starting with a high pass filter and filtering it down, so letting more of the lows come in. So you can imagine when you're designing something that sounds like it's falling, so you want a high pitch sound at the beginning, and then you need a pitch down, so it's coming from up above, so it's pitching down. So it starts very distant, so we want it to be washed out with reverb. And we want it to be high passed up, so it's just a little speck. And then as it comes down, because it's coming more into view and focus, not only is it pitching down, but more of it is becoming present. Now, another thing that I've done here is I've automated up the detune on this. So it starts very in the center, but then as we filter up, you'll hear that because the detune gets further apart, it actually goes out and it gets bigger. And then I have another suck back here that comes in. Now, what I've done is I've actually stacked things up. So we have the nuclear... we do have a nuclear broadcast warning that I forgot to actually mention before. So essentially, this is just some words.
NORAD has detected the launch of 6 nuclear missiles. It is anticipated that these missiles will be armed with nuclear warheads.
So what we get here is I have a boom. A boys noise sample. Then another nuclear sort of tone that I've just added flutter on with an auto pan. And then what I did up here is I made this suck back. Now, the idea of this is to sort of suck you all the way, and think about when you have something that implodes. So it sucks all the way into a point, and then it explodes from there. Because what happens right before a sound that you want impact with affects that impact. So I wanted the nuclear explosion to come in big. So before it, I had to get everything to suck in. So if you listen here... What I've done is I took a suck back, which sounds like this normally. But you can see when you get to the end here, there's way too much low end. Like it's a full spectrum sound. So, first off what I did was, I just cut it so that there's only highs. Cut the lows on that. Oop. My bad, that was on the master. No, I didn't do that. So, first thing I did was... Let's have a look. So I automated up an auto filter. So that cuts all the lows out. So we're going upwards, we're removing frequencies. So in the frequency up and down, we are removing the amount and going to a point. I initially filtered it down, but I decided not to do that because I think it took away too much of the presence. But then what I've done here is you can see that the width I bring down to 0. So not only is it filtering up, but it's also coming in. And you can see physically it's like going onto a point. So it sort of starts, it goes, and then the next thing that happens is an explosion. So, the explosion. What I did in this is I made this in Vital. Now you can figure out how to make this on YouTube, but basically it is a sine wave. So again, I'm at E-2 actually. Now this is interesting because basically when you take a sine wave and then you remove it, so usually I put it at E0, but then I did it 2 octaves down below that. And because it gets so low, the pitch actually starts affecting the volume automation. You'll notice if something gets super low, it can like start to make jittering. And that jittering is almost like a build-up of energy that sort of sparks out. So literally what it is a sine wave and some white noise, and then it just has an envelope. But we basically, I've done some filtering, distorted the hell out of it. Compressed it. And then added reverb. And a bit of delay. And then after that, we have a bunch of effects. So, removing the mids, boosting the lows, boosting up with a saturator, removing the lows now, but only after the first initial hit, because that removes it out the way when the main bass comes in over here. Got a drum bus. This is doing a lot, so I'm driving it and I'm boosting the transients. So it's really just crunching the sound. I got another filter doing the same thing, just lifting it up. A Pro Q to boost the mids and do some side cutting, just a bit of mid-side EQ there. A saturator to soft clip it, and then a side widener to add some side information again. But again, what I've done here is I've automated up the side. So it hits and it's in the middle, and then it explodes outwards and upwards. So then we move on to the main bass. So, what have we done here? So this main bass. So if you guys enjoyed that one, go on head on to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/yussyyussyyussie, and you can catch the rest of that video where I go through the rest of the song.